here I go making another clock inspired by the Legend of Zelda. This one is based around the design of the heart piece. The first piece that I'm cutting out is actually the back piece, and it's cut from 1/4-inch birchwood. I designed this clock specifically to not have any raster etching, primarily to save time, even though this clock still takes forever to cut out. The lines you see it drawing here are just etched onto the surface. None of these are cut out. Here is where it starts to actually cut things out. This is also why it takes forever to do this particular clock. Cutting is much slower than etching. If you don't go slow enough, it won't cut all the way through the wood. In this clock, the design actually has a negative space around the Roman numerals, and that's the part that's cut out of the wood. I really like how this pops, and the fact that you can see the wall behind it is neat to me, but since it's cutting out a gazillion tiny little details around each numeral, and it's going all the way around at the slow cut speed, it takes forever, and any time that I saved from not raster etching is kind of lost on all the cutting. Now I've switched to cutting the second layer pieces. The little designs you see here around the heart piece are taken from the time gate design from Skyward Sword, and this is being cut from 1/8 inch plywood. Since it's thinner, it takes a lot less time to cut through it, so this part is much faster. Finally, it is all cut out and we can sand the pieces. For the heart, I actually only need the inner bits. I don't need the outer rim, but sanding all of the tiny little bits individually is a lot harder, so I keep it all lined up together inside the piece, even though I don't need it. I sanded the outer part first, then I sanded the main back piece. You can see how it lays on top here. Now to make the heart pieces red. At one point I tried using red wood dye instead of paint, but it honestly never came out very good. The thick back piece gets stained dark. I use a red mahogany stain on it and a foam brush. Make sure to wipe away the stain when you're done, or else it'll take way longer to dry and the surface will be rough and tacky. Now it's time for the first coat of polyurethane. This is after I've made sure to let the red paint dry a sufficient amount of time. Shiny, but still wet, so of course it is. And then the raised centerpiece gets a coat of poly too. This is a whole day later after I stained it. You definitely want to make sure that the stain is dry before putting on a poly coat. After the poly has dried, usually another day, I sand them all down. I use 400 grit sandpaper here. At this point, the poly has soaked into all of the surface pores of the wood and it filled them, but the surface of the poly itself is still rough. Sand it flat and you get a really smooth and consistent top surface, but it's no longer shiny because you sanded it and it's all scuffed up now. That's why we apply a second and third coat of polyurethane. After the second coat of poly, time to sand it. At this point I may even use 600 grit sandpaper if I've got it laying around, and I'll get a super smooth surface. With the darker stain up the back piece, you can really see how lighter and scuffed up it gets from being sanded. But the surface is feeling really smooth at this point. I gave it all a second coat of poly, sanded again, and now both the back and the raised pieces will be on the same number of coats for consistency. I've given the heart piece a couple coats of poly too. Here you can finally see me pulling away the guide piece I've been using to keep track of all of the small bits. Final coat of poly for all of the other pieces. Another day later and everything is finally dry. Time to glue it all together. Glued together and oh so shiny. Now let's make it into an actual clock. I've got the little battery-operated quartz movement. The little black circle goes between the movement and the back of the clock. Then the washer goes on the outside of the clock, and the nut actually secures the whole thing together. With the hands, the hour hand is pressed on first. The minute hand is held on by this super tiny little nut that is really easy to lose and very hard to screw on straight. I've got this handy little tool for holding the nut and giving me a decent bit of grip and leverage so that I can line it up properly. The second hand just presses on last. Finally, I put the battery inside and let it run for like 5 or so minutes to test and make sure that it isn't doing anything screwy. And here we go! I hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. This is one of my favorite Zelda clock designs that I've got, but it doesn't really get ordered much. It's a little more low-key since it's not screaming Zelda quite as obviously as some of the others. It has a Triforce, but it's really tiny and it's kind of subtle. If you've got any questions or comments, you can leave them down below. Anyway, I guess that is all for today. Check out my channel for other videos just like this one. Check out my Etsy store for this product and lots of other stuff just like it. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.